How was your week? What did you notice about where you have boundaries and where they're unclear? Are you ready to move into the next part of this exploration? Because I want to begin looking at what gets in the way. Like, why don't we have boundaries? And particularly in areas where things aren't working, right? Things are murky or unclear, or they're just not working. Like maybe we have the experience of being taken advantage of, or people stepping on our toes, or just being unsure of where we stand or people stand in the relationship. And all of those things are pointing to a lack of boundaries. So what gets in the way? I want to share with you a little experience that brought to the surface for me where I didn't have clear enough boundaries. So I was recently having a conversation with someone who was interested in doing coaching work with me. We were on a phone call because she had reached out to learn more about my offerings and how I work and what that might look like to work together. So we're in a conversation on the phone, and I'm engaging with her the way that I engage with anybody who's interested in my work. I'm getting a little bit of information, kind of trying to sense like, where is she in life, and is it a good fit? Like, can I actually make a difference for her, and is she ready for this? And so we're engaged in that conversation, and how do I say this? Let me just say it bluntly. She was being really difficult. She was just being really difficult. You could tell that she was really resigned, and so she was open and interested to hear about my work, but she wasn't really open to it making a difference for her. And I could feel myself starting to get frustrated because she was saying things like, yeah, but I just am not sure that like it would really, could I keep it up, would the change really last, and stuff like that. So you could just kind of hear the resignation, which really indicated to me she wasn't quite ready. Right? She wasn't quite ready to jump in and engage in this kind of work. But I never said that. I didn't acknowledge that. I just got frustrated, like, why am I trying to convince this woman that change is possible in her life when clearly she's not believing it and not ready for it yet? So there was kind of this growing angst, and we ended up getting off the phone, and I think I had given her an assignment to do some journaling around it that I felt might help her get to the bottom of her own resignation. And so I left her to go do that work and got off the phone like, feeling honestly quite exhausted by the exchange. So I reached out to my coach, and I shared the scenario and wanted to get some feedback on what was happening, because it clearly wasn't working very well for me. And the coaching that I received was pretty powerful and spot on when my coach basically said she was being difficult. Like, why didn't you just remove the offer completely? Which is to say, why didn't I just say, you're not ready for this work? I could say it in a very kind and compassionate way, because I certainly could be compassionate for, look, I don't think you're quite ready for the work that I do. So let's just completely remove that from the equation. Okay, let's just take the coaching off the table right now. And I've got the next 10 minutes with you. How can I really make a difference for you? And that was a radical idea to me, right? I had never even considered taking it off the table like that. Like, just drawing a boundary that basically says, I am not available to work with people who aren't quite committed to engaging. They're not ready. As soon as I had that as an option, it made perfect sense to me. It was like, oh my God, yes, I'm like trying to convince her that it's possible, and she doesn't believe it's possible yet. And I don't want to work with a client like that. Do you know how like exhausting and painful it could be if by some miracle she said, yes, let's do this coaching and we move in together? I'd be taking on a client for the next 6 months that was probably a lot like that. And that doesn't really interest me, you know? So it's a really great way for me to see how a lack of a boundary in terms of what I was available for and not, how I was willing to work and how I wasn't, was missing. So why didn't I set that boundary or think I could set that boundary? Okay, so sorry, my chair is like sinking as I talk. Why didn't I set that boundary initially? And when I really looked at it, it was like the thing that was getting in the way for me was I didn't want to be, I wanted to make a difference for her, you know, and I believed I could make a difference for her. And so I didn't want to be unkind, and I didn't want to be rude, and I didn't want to seem like I didn't want to give up on her, was kind of what it felt like, right? So I had some concern about how my boundary would be perceived by her. I didn't want to hurt her feelings. And I think that that's the case in a lot of situations. So I want us to begin exploring this. Whatever you discovered last week about where you have boundaries and where you don't, begin to look at the places that you don't, the places where the boundaries don't exist or they're just not clear. And what do you begin to notice about why those boundaries are missing? What is it that keeps you from putting a boundary in place or drawing a line? What keeps you from saying, this doesn't work for me? Are you afraid? Are you concerned with other people's feelings? Do you not want to seem whatever, fill in the blank, rude or inconsiderate or self-righteous or whatever it is? What gets in the way for you of drawing a boundary? That's this week's exploration, and I'd love to know what you discover. Next week, we'll start to look at what's the cost. And you can hear, I'm alluding to it here in my own example. So we'll address that next week.